Canada is making the most dramatic declaration in its modern history, and it's sending shockwaves through North America. Canadian columnist Stephen Marche has just published what might be the most explosive essay of 2025, arguing that Canada must completely break free from the United States under Trump's presidency. We're not talking about minor trade disputes or diplomatic tensions. This is about Canada fundamentally redefining its relationship with America, potentially forever. So what exactly did Marche say that has everyone talking? And why is this happening right now when Canada just got a brand new prime minister? To understand this seismic shift, we need to look at what's been building between these two nations over the past few months. In his New York Times essay, Stephen Marche, author of The Next Civil War and host of the popular Gloves Off podcast, didn't mince words. He wrote that the question for Canada is no longer how to maintain its relationship with America, but how to extricate ourselves from America and how painful that will be. This isn't just political commentary. This is a former Goldman Sachs analyst and respected economist essentially declaring that Canada's 150-year partnership with the United States is over. Marche's argument centers on what he sees as America's fundamental transformation under Trump. He cited Trump's recent escalation of tariffs on Canada from 25% to 35% as evidence that the U.S. is no longer a country that keeps its agreements, but it goes deeper than trade.
To your ambassador, the U.S. Ambassador Hillman, I think she's characterized Canada's position right now as one that lots of countries around the world would be envious of, because the effective tariff rate for Canada right now on all goods and services going into the U.S. is about 5%. That's not a bad place for Canada to be right now.
So if I understand your answer to that question correctly, you're saying it's the energy in the room is the reason why Canada got hit and Mexico did not?
Well, Canada really, number one, Canada really didn't get hit very hard. Okay?
But still got hit, and Mexico did not.
Mexico did not, and it's, the negotiators, I'm assuming, are sitting in the room and saying, okay, we're making, the negotiations that we're in right now with Mexico and where we believe we are headed, say, we're making significant progress, and maybe the dynamics in terms of describing the relationship with Canada are slightly different. I'm not in the room, okay? So I can't tell you specifically why Canada got hit with those tariffs and Mexico did not.
But you're the ambassador to Canada, so
I am the ambassador to Canada, yes.
So why, I guess my question is, does Canada, I guess another way to sort of get at this is, did Canada, the fact that Canada has imposed retaliatory tariffs on the United States, did that play a factor in the decision? There's
a number of issues that could affect the decision that the president made. It's retaliatory.
The energy in the room during recent negotiations has shown a fundamental breakdown in diplomatic relations. While Mexico received extensions and accommodations, Canada found itself increasingly isolated, with U.S. officials suggesting that the negotiators felt they were making more progress with other nations. This differential treatment has sent a clear message about where Canada stands in Trump's New World Order. Trump's repeated statements about wanting Canada to become the 51st state have crossed a line that many Canadians see as existential. Think about that for a moment. The President of the United States is openly talking about annexing America's closest ally and largest trading partner.
Well, first of all, I start off every interview with saying how much we love Americans, how much we love the U.S. And as I've said on this show many times, that a tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people. And as you've seen, the study from Yale, it's going to cost Americans $2,400. Manufacturing employment in the U.S., there's over 37,000 people since April have lost their jobs. It's the lowest rate in 5 years, and it's just not working. Let's create the AMCAN fortress, two strongest countries in the world. Again, this is hurting the American people as the rest of the countries, including Canada, is diversifying our trade. We're seeing a 25% increase in trade with the European Union. The UK is up by 30%. So as we're diversifying and onshoring products, the American people are losing their jobs.
What would the impact be for Canada and for the U.S. if President Trump pulled out of that agreement?
Well, it would be unfortunate. We directly employ, just Ontario alone, 9 million Americans, and across the entire country of Canada is probably closer to 20 million Americans rely on Canada for jobs, and vice versa. We rely on jobs with trade with the U.S., but it's just hurting both countries. And as we're diversifying and the rest of the world's diversifying, onshoring products that are typically made.
The economic devastation is already visible. Since April, 37,000 Americans have lost manufacturing jobs, the lowest employment rate in 5 years. A Yale study shows these policies will cost American families $2,400 annually. Yet the tariffs continue, proving that this isn't about economics, it's about power and control. For Canadians, this isn't political theater, it's a direct threat to their sovereignty. Marche argues that America has begun to backslide out of democracy and is dismantling its elite institutions one by one. He sees this as breaking the aspirational connection that has bound the two countries together for generations. As he puts it, the question is no longer how to stop comparing ourselves with the United States, but how to escape its grasp and its fate. But here's what makes this moment even more significant. Canada just got a new prime minister who seems ready to fight back. Mark Carney, the former central banker who took over from Justin Trudeau in March 2025, has already shown he's not backing down from Trump's threats. When Carney won the Liberal Party leadership, he didn't just accept the role quietly. In his victory speech, he directly confronted Trump's tariff threats.
Element of CUSMA, or what they would call USMCA. So it's important to preserve that, it's important to reinforce that, and part of our discussions is about that. We are also very cognizant that in about 9 months from now, the first review of USMCA, CUSMA as we call it, will begin between the three parties. So there's a bigger picture there. The third thing, just from context, is we've always said that we will apply tariffs where they had the maximum impact in the United States and a minimum impact in Canada. And so we don't automatically adjust. We look at what we can do for our industry that's most effective. In some cases, that will be to remove tariffs. We have removed some tariffs over time so that, for example, the auto industry can function more effectively. And we'll look at opportunities to do so, because in the end, we're looking at having the best impact in Canada.
While maintaining that 85% of Canada-US trade remains tariff-free, Carney has made it clear that strategic responses will be applied where they have maximum impact on the US and minimum impact on Canada. His philosophy is simple: build domestic strength rather than automatic retaliation, but be prepared to act decisively when necessary. This is a completely different tone from what we've seen in Canada-US relations. Carney has already quoted his assertion that Canada's old relationship with the US was over. This isn't diplomatic speak. This is a fundamental shift in how Canada sees itself in relation to America. The timing of all this is crucial. Trump's tariff escalation hit Canada hard, raising duties from 25% to 35% on Canadian goods that fall outside the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
Just in the last 3 months, we've seen the U.S. auto industry face $6.2 billion in tariff-related costs, with most of them projecting significantly higher costs for the year. We're looking at 37,000 manufacturing jobs that have disappeared in the U.S., and factory employment is the lowest it's been in 5 years, which is not a good thing. And you see what happens with President Trump. Someone gives them the wrong job numbers that are accurate job numbers, they get fired. Well, President Trump has to realize it's costing companies billions of dollars. So they need to shift and start looking at working collaboratively with us.
The U.S. auto industry alone has faced $6.2 billion in tariff-related costs over just 3 months. Major companies like Procter & Gamble have seen billion-dollar impacts, while Ford Motor Company struggles with the cascading effects of these trade wars. Canada retaliated with its own measures, including a 50% surcharge on steel imports that exceed certain quotas. But Marche argues that Canada's response proves the country can compete globally without relying on the U.S.
Faster, we will build Canadian, prioritizing Canadian lumber, Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum in Canadian construction. Canada's new government is working to double the pace of new home building to almost 500,000 new units a year over the course of the next decade. That alone could double the use of Canadian softwood lumber in new residential construction, an increase of almost 2 billion board feet, and double the demand for structural panels, an increase of nearly 1 billion square feet. To help realize that potential, this fall, we will launch Build Canada Homes. Build Canada Homes will start by getting the government back in the business of building deeply affordable homes, and in the process, catalyze a new housing industry using Canadian technology, Canadian lumber, and Canadian workers. Core to Build Canada's Homes mandate will be to provide up to $25 billion in financing to innovative private sector home builders in Canada. For the deeply affordable homes that we finance and build, Build Canada Homes will catalyze bulk orders of off-site construction of prefabricated and modular homes, specifying the use of Canadian technologies and resources. This combination will create enormous sustained demand for Canadian lumber products. And it's just one example of the possibilities. Just a few hours drive from here in Castlegar, Kalsnikoff Mass Timber recently opened their 100,000 square foot mass timber.
The Canadian government has announced comprehensive support measures, including $700 million in loan guarantees and $500 million in grants for product development and market diversification. The goal is clear: reduce dependence on the U.S. market, where 90% of Canadian exports currently go, and pivot toward domestic growth and reliable international partners. He points to Canada's first shipment of liquefied natural gas to South Korea and ongoing importing deals with China as evidence that Canada has alternatives. This represents a strategic pivot that's been years in the making, but Trump's aggressive stance has accelerated it dramatically. What's particularly striking about Marsh's analysis is how he frames this as Canada's coming-of-age moment. He writes that Canada has experienced the second Trump administration like a teenager being kicked out of the house by an abusive father. We have to grow up fast and we can't go back. This metaphor resonates because it captures something many Canadians are feeling, that the protective, if sometimes condescending, relationship with the U.S. is fundamentally broken. Canada can no longer rely on American goodwill or assume that shared values will protect the relationship. The implications of this shift extend far beyond North America. Marcia envisions Canada as a connector between the world's democracies in a line that stretches from Taiwan and South Korea across North America to Poland and Ukraine. This positioning would make Canada a bridge between Pacific democracies, European allies, and potentially other nations seeking alternatives to American hegemony. Canada's advantages in this new role are significant. The country has maintained strong relationships with both European allies and Pacific partners. Its multicultural society and commitment to international law give it credibility that the U.S. under Trump has lost. As Marsh notes, Canada can show that multiculturalism works, that it remains possible to have an open society that does not consume itself. But this transformation won't be easy or painless. The economic integration between Canada and the U.S. runs incredibly deep. Over $410 billion in goods crossed the border last year. Canadian energy exports, particularly oil and electricity, are crucial to American infrastructure. Breaking these ties, even partially, would require massive economic restructuring. The political challenges are equally daunting. While Marche criticizes Trump specifically, he also argues that America itself is in the middle of a grand abdication, as even Democratic governors try to get along with the president. This suggests the problem isn't just Trump, it's a broad, American retreat from the values and institutions that once made the partnership work. What makes this moment particularly dangerous is the speed at which things are moving. In May, Marsh suggested that war between the US and Canada was no longer inconceivable, stating that when countries are in constitutional crisis and when their legal system starts to fall apart, as America's legal system is falling apart, violence against neighboring countries is very common. This isn't hyperbole when you consider Trump's willingness to use economic warfare as a tool of coercion. The tariffs aren't just about trade, they're about forcing Canada into submission. Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state aren't jokes. They're trial balloons testing how far he can push before facing real resistance. Canada's response under Carney suggests those days of accommodation are over. The new Prime Minister has already streamlined his cabinet from over 30 members to 24, creating what he calls a smaller, experienced cabinet that moves faster, secures our economy, and protects Canada's future. This isn't just administrative efficiency, it's preparation for economic warfare. The international community is watching this closely. When Carney won Canada's federal election in April 2025, European Union leader Ursula von der Leyen quickly praised him, emphasizing their shared commitment to defend our shared democratic values, promote multilateralism, and champion free and fair trade. China's foreign ministry expressed readiness to grow relations with Canada on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit. These aren't routine diplomatic pleasantries, they're signals that other major powers see Canada as a potential alternative to American leadership. For Canada, the choice is becoming stark. Continue trying to manage an increasingly abusive relationship with the US, or strike out on its own and risk the economic and security consequences. Marsh's essay suggests that choice has already been made. As he concludes, we have to reckon with the fact that from now on, our power will come from only ourselves. The broader implications of this shift could reshape global politics. If Canada successfully diversifies away from the US economy and builds stronger ties with other democracies, it could provide a model for other American allies facing similar pressures. European nations dealing with Trump's unpredictability, Pacific allies concerned about American reliability, and developing nations seeking alternatives to American-dominated institutions would all be watching Canada's experiment closely. But success is far from guaranteed. Canada's economy is still deeply integrated with the US, and breaking those ties would cause significant short-term pain. The security relationship, including NORAD and NATO commitments, would become incredibly complicated, and there's always the risk that economic separation could escalate into something more serious. What we're witnessing is potentially the end of the special relationship that has defined North America for over a century. The undefended border, the integrated economies, the shared values, all of this is being tested by Trump's America First agenda and Canada's growing unwillingness to accept subordinate status. Marsh's essay captures a moment when one of America's closest allies is seriously considering what life would look like without American partnership. For Canada, this represents both an enormous opportunity and an enormous risk. The country has the resources, relationships, and values to succeed independently. But the transition would be painful and uncertain. The choices Canada makes in the next few months, as Marsh notes, will matter forever. They will reveal our national character. For Americans, this should be a wake-up call about the real costs of Trump's approach to international relations. Losing Canada as a reliable partner and economic partner would be a strategic disaster that could take decades to reverse. The fact that serious Canadian voices are even discussing this possibility shows how far the relationship has deteriorated. The question now is whether this is just political posturing or the beginning of a fundamental realignment in North American relations. Marsh's essay suggests it's the latter. With Carney in power and Trump showing no signs of backing down, Canada appears ready to test whether it can truly go it alone. The world is about to find out if one of the most successful partnerships in modern history can survive the Trump era, or if Canada will indeed find a way to escape America's grasp, no matter how painful that process might be. As March puts it, anger is a useful emotion, but only as a point of departure. Canada appears to be using that anger as fuel for the most ambitious restructuring of its international relationships in its modern history. The outcome will determine not just Canada's future, but the future of American influence in an increasingly multipolar world.